General, obviously in your neighborhood, we have the kind of, again, what even the report acknowledges is the most despairing situation on the planet right now with regards to conflict, both internally displaced and trans-border conflict. Do you see any international governance hope? Because again, it seems we failed massively with regards to Syria, even to some degree with regards to ISIS. Do you see any hope for international governance having any successes in that realm? Or is all lost, and must we appeal to something other than transnational institutions?
Yeah, I want to first refer to the report optimism, because they are saying that a pessimist is an optimist with experience. So you see that the head of the think tanks are quite optimistic, even though they are very experienced, or they gave the job to their young research assistant. Albert Einstein was asked by one of his students about the coming examination. And the student asked, are the questions going to be the same like last year? And Einstein replied that the question will be the same question, but the answer is going to be different this year. Which means the world is changing, and changing fast. And if you take my region, there are like 5 states that when we went to high school, they were states. Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Lebanon. Not anymore. There are new states that we never recognized, but they are there on the ground. Kurdistan, Hamastan, the Islamic State. So it's a different world. And sometimes we are judging it with rules and norms and international governance that belong to a different period. I think the grade here is reflecting a very short range looking at the world. And maybe for 2016, it's the right view. But my concern is for the long run. And I think think tanks should look at the long run. And there is a methodology issue here that the most important problems are on the lowest grade. So somebody has to do the balance and to give it some, in the final grade, how comes that the most important issue get the lowest grade? And they are the most difficult to deal with. This is very important finding of the report and need to change the final score. So on proliferation, I think Iran is a wonderful example. Because my grade to the Iranian deal was not F, like my prime minister, which says this is a new Holocaust. It is not a new Holocaust, because Israel is very strong, and Israel can cope even with nuclear Iran. Even though nuclear Iran is a very, very grave and bleak development. It is not a diplomatic achievement that will bring another Nobel Prize. No. It's in the middle. In the short run, it's B. It's B, because Iran is rolled back a year. And if, and this is a big if they will keep the agreement, they will stay there for 10, 12, 15 years, depends on what area of the agreement. However, it is not A minus. A minus was 3 years. A was, no nuclear capabilities in Iran. It's still very close to the bomb upon decision. But the F is in the long run. The F is in the long run. Because in the long run, this agreement gave Iran a legitimacy to have an unlimited nuclear program with 200,000 centrifuges if they wish, 30 nuclear reactors if they wish.
How do you define the long run?
10 to 15 years. This is the agreement.
When the ceilings expire.
And if we are at that time with the same regime that called to the elimination of my country, this is a big problem for the world security and safety. And then you take North Korea, that basically signed the same agreement on the 90s and violated after a couple of years. So I think the main challenge for us is not to argue about how good is the deal, is to look into the future 10 years. And here are, very shortly, 3 scenarios. One, optimistic. The Iranians are changing. The young generation, the Facebook generation, the Twitter generation is coming forward and taking over from the mullahs. Okay, this is an optimistic scenario. The Iranians become Norwegians. Wonderful. Percentage, Richard?
Approximately 5%.
5%. Amazing. My number as well. Even though many Americans say, general, 0.5. But second, North Korean scenario. After 3 years, 4 years, they got all the money, they built a better military, and they violate the agreement. So North Korea scenario. And there is even more dangerous one, which is the Iranian scenario. Strategic patient, and within 10 to 15 years, and this is not General Yadlin, this is President Obama saying, 0 distance from the bomb. So it couldn't be A-.
Mm-hmm. On that question, I have to ask you as such an informed source, is it not inevitable, though, that Iran will be a nuclear state, and therefore is not the F inevitable?
It is possible to stop them as some other countries were stopped. Iraq, you mentioned the case. According to the international media, Syria, 2007. Think about Syria today. El-Kabar, where the North Korean nuclear reactor, which has only one use for military bomb, is in the hands of, this is a territory now occupied by ISIS. Think about it. And ISIS haven't attacked Israel. London, Brussels, Turkey, Syria, Iraq. So I think Iran should not have a nuclear program, and they can be stopped if the countries that, by the way, this is the only point that President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu agrees. Only point, which say Iran will not have the nuclear bomb. So let's hope that the two gentlemen will, in case of the two bleak scenarios, not the optimistic one, will do what they have to do in the next, if Iran will violate the agreement.
General Yadlin, if I can ask you a question with regards to that coordination idea and amongst challenges. When it comes to your neighborhood, and especially I'm thinking of the fight against Islamic State, is this an issue of transnational governance, or is it actually an issue of bilateral or even unilateral action on the part of great powers or regional powers?
Unlike the view from Washington, which look at the Islamic State as the most dangerous phenomena in the Middle East, we still think that the most formidable threat to the Middle East, maybe the Saudis are thinking alike, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And when you look at it from an Israeli perspective, Daesh is not a threat to Israel today. If you put it on a scale of how many tons of explosive our enemy can launch to Tel Aviv. So the Iranians, hundreds of missiles with heavy warheads. Hezbollah, maybe thousands. Some from Hamas, not too many. Daesh, with all due respect, they are fighting with Hezbollah as we speak. And if I want to be cynical a little bit, I wish success for both. So Daesh is not our main concern. It's still Iran that basically the threat to the Middle East. And when you look from perspective in Tel Aviv, all the world is fighting Daesh. Mm-hmm. Two very respected coalitions. One led by the President of the United States, even though he never called the 65 countries to his headquarters to talk to them seriously. But it's a serious coalition. And there is another more ugly coalition led by Russia and Iran and Syria and Hezbollah, and all of them fighting ISIS. With Iran, unfortunately, we were left alone. So we take it much more seriously.
Your earlier answer about Iran and kind of what happens in the 12 to 15 years and the hope, basically, of those who supported the agreement, hoping that Iran will change, that Iran's on a course toward change. It reminded me of kind of the lessons that we also may have learned, I don't know, maybe too much, from the Cold War. The U.S. facing its greatest adversary in the Soviet Union, there was certainly containment and there was certainly military and power involved. But also there was wading through a containment of Russia while Russia crumbled. The hope that internal dynamics will mean that we won't have to act militarily with regard to Iran. You think that's silly? Not possible? Is it possible? Might it work? Might Iran be on the road to change? Might there be a way for the international community to help that along?
See, the art of using your political and military instrument is when to use them and when not to use them. And I think it was already mentioned in this panel that the US demonstrated the two extremes. Overreaction, 2 wars, $2 trillion, a decade long, not achieving the objectives. And there was another demonstration of inaction. The Syrians crossed the red line, used, by the way, if we speak about proliferation, chemical weapon, a very dangerous and chemical weapon, sarin, 2013, and nothing was done. By the way, I don't know if you are aware, but a month ago they used it again. Even though there was an agreement, international cooperation between US and Russia, to take the chemical weapon from Syria. A small stock was left and used last month. It was published in Haaretz in Israel by a very respected reporter. Nobody paid attention. Nobody paid attention. Most of the people didn't want to pay attention. So what are the consequences of using chemical weapons? So going back to your question about cooperation. What's really interesting in the Middle East is that the interest of all the players intervene. And there is a new term there, which is called friendemy. It's not the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In the same time that I'm fighting my enemy, I'm also cooperating with him. In the same time that the US and Russia are fighting ISIS together, they have different interests. In the same time that Assad fights ISIS, he is buying oil from ISIS. And both of them fight, unfortunately, the opposition that is supported by the US. Our enemy is Hamas. Who is giving Hamas materials to rebuild Gaza? Is it Saudi Arabia? Is it Turkey? No, it's Israel. And we are playing with the tensions that we want Assad to reconstruct and to rebuild, but we know that a high percentage is going to build and attack tunnels for the terrorists. So it's a complicated area. There is a lot of convergence of interest to Israel with countries that in the past we didn't see as friends. Mm-hmm. Because when I meet some of my friends from Saudi Arabia, not officially, not on the record, the basic argument is, look, on Iran we are on the same page. Unfortunately, the Americans are here. On Egypt, we are on the same page. We both support Sisi. Unfortunately, we are not sure that the Americans are not supporting Muslim Brotherhood. On Assad, they know that I personally think that he is a war criminal and should be removed. So we are on the same page. Unfortunately, on the Palestinian-Israeli issue, we are not on the same page. So my Saudi friend will say, only solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue and we will be brothers in the open. So there are some new opportunities here for Israel, because when you look at the region, we have a lot of interests that converge with the pragmatic Sunni Arab countries which are the majority in the Middle East.